Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon for you. It's still morning for me where I am out in Arizona. I'm Mark McCall. I'm your facilitator for the day, and we're so glad you're here on a Saturday. Thank you very much for coming to share your talents with us. I'll have the judges introduce themselves in just a moment, and then they'll ask you to introduce yourself. Just a reminder on your timing. We have 4 minutes for your prepared speech, 8 minutes for your follow-up questions, and then the judges will provide you feedback afterward. And to help with timing, since there's so many boxes there, you might miss a sign or something. I'll do a virtual background. When you have 1 minute left, I'll switch to green. And when your time is up at 4 minutes and 8 minutes, I'll switch to yellow. And with that, just a reminder that if you're not speaking, please stay muted. And parents and guests, please turn off your video. So we're focusing just on the students today. And with that, I'll turn it over to our judges.
Candidate, you're muted. You're still
there you go.
Okay, very sorry. Good morning, everybody. And it is still morning. No, it's an afternoon here. And congratulations on getting yourselves to the National Invitational Finals here. We're very happy to see you. My name is Candida Steele, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. And Rebecca?
Congratulations for getting here, and thank you to your teachers and coaches. We're so grateful that you were able to participate in such a difficult year. My name is Rebecca Tinder. I'm a retired attorney from Charleston, West Virginia, and the West Virginia We the People coordinator.
I'm Lindsay Draper. I'm retired from the juvenile court bench here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, where it's also still morning.
And could you introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
Hi, I'm Audrey Miracle. I'm an 8th grader at Henley Middle School, and our teachers are Miss Curry and Miss Beauchene.
Hi, I'm Isabel Brand, and I'm in 8th grade.
Hi, I'm Ollie Nacy. I'm in 8th grade, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity, and I'm really excited to be here.
Great.
My name is Margaret, and I'm an 8th grader at Henley Middle School.
Super. Okay, well, we're going to do question 1 today in Unit 5. Are we all in the right place? Okay, I'll read that for the audience. Quote, "When a choice must be made, it is better to allow those who preach racial hate rather than to be panicked into embarking on the dangerous course of permitting the government to decide what its citizens may say and hear. Do you agree or disagree with Judge Bernard Decker's upholding the rights of Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois? Why?" You may begin.
Although the message of the Nazi group and the Skokie case is abhorrent, everyone has a right to peacefully protest for what they believe in. As Justice Oliver Holmes said in the case United States versus Schwimmer, if there is any principle of the Constitution that more imperatively calls for attachment than any other, it is the principle of free thought. Not free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate. What Justice Holmes is saying is that freedom of speech is not just for those who agree with us, but the ones who disagree with us as well. In the Supreme Court case Brandenburg versus Ohio, the court ruled that the government can't limit speech unless it is directed at, inciting, or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. In the Skokie case, the Nazi Party complied with all the rules for a peaceful assembly, and if they ever incited violence or lawless action, then law enforcement could step in. While speech can be fairly punished after the fact, it should not be stopped before it happens.
The Miller test, the Brandenburg test, and limits on time, place, and manner are all limits on the freedom of expression placed by the Supreme Court. The Miller test determines whether a form of expression is obscene and constitutionally limiting said material. In the case Pope versus Illinois involving obscene magazines that were being sold, the local court used the Miller test. The local court judged all 3 prongs of the Miller test as a community instead of judging the last prong as an average citizen of the community. There are also time, place, and manner restrictions, which are included for public safety while still allowing people to freely express themselves. In the case Cox versus New Hampshire in 1939, over 80 people gathered to have an information march without a license required by the state. Cox and the group were convicted of violating the statute prohibiting unlicensed assemblies. The Supreme Court agreed that the First Amendment's guarantees did not come before the safety of the public by limiting the time, place, and manner through requiring a permit. Another limit is the Brandenburg test, which determines whether or not forms of expression, especially hate speech, produce imminent lawless action.
Ideas that are intended to antagonize or alarm members of society are not useful. In the Skokie case, the ruling was correct based on the current laws in place at the time, but there should have been more restrictions in place. Speech needs to be better regulated, and we have to prevent it from growing into physical damage. The First Amendment states that the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. This statement is very broad and outdated. By protecting hate speech rather than protecting the oppressed, it's implying that they're less important and it's actively hurting our government. An NYU study showed that there was a direct correlation between hate speech and hate crimes. The study consistently showed that years with higher amounts of racially offensive Twitter posts had higher quantities of racially motivated crimes. One downside of limiting hate speech would be that it could lead to more censorship of opinions, but it's worth the risk. There have already been some boundaries on free speech, such as the Tinker test, which monitors the freedom of speech in schools. So it wouldn't be too hard to regulate hate speech.
Some users on social media may believe that the jokes they make are humorous, but in various cases, it can result in consequences. Even though this may be a problem, some people depend on social media to express themselves, and there should be no kind of censorship on those thoughts. In the 2015 case, Alonis versus the United States, Anthony Alonis had been convicted of transmitting threats through posts on the app Facebook, appearing to threaten multiple people. Alonis claimed the words that he said were protected by the First Amendment, but the court statement in the case United States versus Kellner says otherwise. According to the court, in the circumstances in which a threat is made specific to convey an imminent prospect of execution, in certain cases, true threats are not protected by the First Amendment, nor are fighting words or other forms of speech made to intentionally incite violence. But it's important to keep in mind that social media is a private business that does not have to follow the Constitution. The First Amendment only prohibits Congress from abridging the right of free speech, not private individuals. Social media companies can decide if they would like to set limits themselves without being swayed by the Constitution.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm not sure I understood from your statement there. Are you suggesting that there should not be limits placed on social media, but there should be limits placed on hate speech?
Social media companies don't have to follow the Constitution, which means they can decide if they want to set limits on hate speech themselves.
But I was right that you're saying that there should be censorship in some fashion by the government for hate speech, but not social media regulation. I'm correct?
Yeah.
What's other than the fact that it's a private company, what's the distinction if the social media has such a range? Or somebody else can ask another question.
Sure. You mentioned in your prepared remarks that speech shouldn't be limited generally, that you could always punish after the fact. Should spreading false information be protected by the First Amendment?
No, false information should not be protected under the First Amendment, because false information isn't just a matter of opinion. It isn't just a matter of speech. It's lies, and often the false information is specifically crafted to play into this bias that the person making it has. And a good example of a case where false information grew and grew and grew into something terrible is the January 6th riot, where these there were all of these ideas being spread that there was cheating in the election and that the election wasn't valid at all, and there's no evidence of that. It's not true, but all of this information was being spread that played into this bias, and it created this group of people who were angry about something that wasn't even a problem. And eventually it escalated to January 6th, where there was this huge breaking into the Capitol and this huge aggressive riot.
And that is why speech can be fairly punished after the fact, because many people that were participants in this insurrection or riot were arrested and brought to court fairly.
And just going a little bit on that, where I'm struggling a bit is there were people who truly in their hearts believed that there had been irregularities in the election. When they repeated what they believed to be true, what was wrong with that speech? They were repeating what they thought was true. Is that impermissible?
Yes, because what they were believing to be true, there's a difference between opinion and fact. And so they're repeating this, that they're saying to be fact when it isn't fact. That's different from them stating their opinion on a matter.
And if, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. We saw on social media apps when former President Trump was spreading misinformation, social media companies took action and removed his accounts because of the false information he was spreading, because they knew that it was leading to harm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, well, could you define hate speech? You gave a good start, but could you elaborate on the definition of hate speech, please?
The constitutional definition, from what I've learned, is hate speech is producing imminent lawless action or inciting violence or hurtful manners onto somebody or something. But hate speech, the true definition to the people of the government and the country, is all about perspective and what you think is hate speech from how you've grown up. If you've grown up in a very loving place where racial slurs are taught to be wrong and hate speech, then of course you're going to believe that's hate speech. But if you grow up in a completely opposite environment, hate speech is going to be different for you. But the constitutional definition is somewhere in the middle.
And playing off of that, I don't think that's necessarily how it should be. Sure, it is very based on perspective, and it's based on sometimes on opinion and what you see as right and wrong. But I feel like with the constitutional definition being producing like violence, that shouldn't be the case, because it doesn't always. And like my example was in my written statement, it can lead to hate crimes and it can lead to violence in the future, but that's not always immediate. And so it's not always, you can't always like see right away that that's what's causing it. And it can also cause emotional damage, and it can cause emotional trauma. And I think emotional trauma should to some extent be included.
It should be considered.
I would also like to add that a lot of people compare hate speech and true threats, but the difference between true threats and hate speech is that hate speech, going off of what everybody else has said, is opinion-based. It depends on how you've grown, and true threats are not protected by the First Amendment, but hate speech is, because it is still a form of free speech.
Does freedom of expression contribute to good government? And explain your answer.
Yes, freedom of expression does contribute to the government. When you are free to express yourself, you can air your grievances to the government and what you think is unjust. And like we saw last year with the Black Lives Matter protests, who were protesting police brutality and systemic racism. And since then, the government has taken steps forward to take police reform by many states banning chokeholds and tear gas which were used on protesters last summer, and more fair trials for police.
As well as in the case Edwards versus South Carolina, when a group of African Americans came and protested to the South Carolina government for redress of grievances on how they were being treated.
I have to admit, you've caught me off guard with that case. I'm not sure. Can you tell me a little bit about that case? I don't know that.
So Edwards versus South Carolina is a case where a group of 187 school students came to.
You know what? It's up to me to look that one up. I'm going to cut you off because that was more for my edification and we ran out of time. So good job.
Thank you so much.
Great job. That was a great job. You covered such a wide range of thoughts. You're bringing up Schwimmer was great, Brandenburg, of course, but the Miller test on obscenity and Cox versus New Hampshire. And I would like to have come back and asked you why you thought the First Amendment was outdated. We could have hit that a little more. But I think you did a lovely job. Thank you. It was a pleasure to hear you, and you, at least Ollie certainly expressed excitement at the beginning here, and I hope all of you were, to be doing this, and that you're inspired to be good citizens as a result of what you've learned, and you'll drag along your friends and family to go vote every chance they have. But I hope that you're inspired enough that someone, if you might be interested in going into political science and finding out more about how our government runs, and I'd like you to do that because you obviously understand what you're talking about, and boy, do we need people in the government who know what they're talking about. So I hope you'll consider local, state, or federal government service. For the rest of us, we'll all sleep better if you do. Thank you.
Well done, and congratulations to both you and your teachers and coaches. Excellent presentation. As my colleague said, just chock full, your 4-minute prepared remarks, which we could have unpacked for hours and hours, but we ran out of time. I particularly liked your ability when answering the questions to tie it into current events, including the January 6th riot, as you described it, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement, and your local Edwards versus South Carolina case. And our discussion kind of exemplified the struggle we have with opinions and false information, and where do we draw that line where the First Amendment protects or doesn't protect particular speech, and how we go about analyzing that. And I think the struggle was evident, that we all struggle with that, and the fact that you all are struggling with that at such a young age is phenomenal. Congratulations.
I was really impressed with a couple of things. And one, you sort of summarized where I think we all, or no, I'm sorry, I can't talk about everybody, where I fall on this in your, it's all about perspective comment. When you talked about, well, one of the dangers in hate speech is hate speech has a relationship to hate crimes. And there were a number of other examples like that that I have note here. You touched on the cases that I wanted to hear. You make reference to. I wanted to hear about the Edwards versus South Carolina one. In fact, on the break here, I'm going to go look that up because I don't know what you're talking about. And you might have pulled one off on me. I don't know. I trust you. But it really was an excellent presentation that I very much enjoyed, and I really appreciated the balance and discussion that you had, where you each had, frankly, what I kind of identified as a perspective that I said, okay, this is how she feels, this is how she feels, and it came quite through, quite clear as I listened to it. So you were just excellent. I enjoyed it. Congratulations, and you and your teacher are to be congratulated. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, team. Thank you, Ms. Corey and Ms. Beauchesne, and we will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day. And thank you, parents, for coming out today to support.
Thank you.
Thank you.